10 countries that could go bankrupt at any moment. 1. Argentina. Argentina holds a record in sovereign defaults. It's headed that way again. The peso now trades at a near 50% discount in the black market. Reserves are critically low, while bonds trade at just 20 cents in the dollar. In 2024, Argentina will need to service a huge debt, but it may willingly choose to default once again. 2. Ukraine. Ukraine is more than $20 billion in debt. The Russian invasion has dealt a blow to the economy. $1.2 billion of bond payments are due in September. Aid money and reserves mean Kiev could potentially pay, but state-run Naftogaz is already asking for a 2-year debt freeze. Investors suspect the government might follow suit. 3. Tunisia. Tunisia's budget deficit is nearing 10%. It also has one of the highest public sector wage bills in the world. Tunisian bond spreads have risen to over 2,800 basis points. It's almost certain a deal with the IMF is on the cards. 4. Ghana. Ghana has been borrowing too liberally. Now its debt-to-GDP ratio is a whopping 85%. The Ghanaian cedi has lost nearly 25% of its value this year. Ghana is spending over 50% of tax revenues on debt interest payments. Meanwhile, inflation is getting close to 30%. 5. Egypt. Egypt has a near 95% debt-to-GDP ratio. It has lost some $11 billion in a massive cash exodus this year. Over the next 5 years, Egypt will have to pay $100 billion of debt. A $3.3 billion bond comes due in 2024. Cairo devalued the pound 15% in March, but bond spreads are now over 1,200 basis points. 6. Kenya. Kenya spends 30% of revenues on interest payments. Its bonds have lost almost half their value. It currently has no access to capital markets. That's a huge problem, considering a $2 billion bond comes due in 2024. 7. El Salvador. El Salvador went the unusual step of making Bitcoin legal tender. This virtually closed the door to IMF hopes. Investor trust has fallen to critical lows. An $800 million bond, maturing in 6 months, trades at a 30% discount. Longer-term bonds trade at a 70% discount. 8. Pakistan. Pakistan is on the brink of a balance of payment crisis. Foreign currency reserves have fallen to $9.8 billion. That's hardly enough for 5 weeks of energy imports. The Pakistani rupee has weakened to record lows. The government spends 40% of its revenues on interest payments. 9. Ecuador. Ecuador already defaulted just 2 years ago, but a new crisis is brewing after a wave of violent protests. Ecuador has lots of debt, and the government subsidizes fuel and food. Ecuador's public sector fiscal deficit is projected to be 2.4% of GDP this year. Bond spreads have topped 1,500 basis points. 10. Russia. Russia's economy has underperformed for 15 years, but the Ukraine invasion made things much worse. Russia has faced extensive sanctions from the West. Its access to foreign reserves, banking networks, and energy markets is restricted. Divestment has left the country strapped for currency. This has resulted in high inflation, deep recession, and rising prices. Russia holds the lowest position in the global average GDP ranking. It lost an average 8.5% from 2018 to 2022.